And welcome in, everybody, to another edition of the College Hoop News Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Patelis. Tonight, I am solo. No guests tonight. I'm going to be handling the podcast by myself. So we don't have a ton to talk about tonight. Obviously, December's been pretty slow with finals and everything. But we did have a pretty great slate of games this past weekend. So I'm going to get into all the big games, share my thoughts. Share some top 25 thoughts. We also had some injuries, unfortunately, this weekend. So a lot to talk about. As I said, a lot of finals this week, finals week. So not much action. December's kind of slow for college hoops. It'll pick up once conference play starts, but still plenty of games to talk about. It still looks like, unfortunately, the Pac-12, the Atlantic 10, the Mountain West still struggling. Even the SEC, who a conference that I was really, really high on, and a lot of people were this preseason, hasn't really lived up to expectations, which is pretty disappointing. I thought they were going to be a really, really deep league, this year, and it's just not panning out right now. But certainly things could change. There's still plenty of time left. Outside the Big 12, outside the Big 10 and the ACC, there's just a lot of mediocrity right now. I think this NCAA tournament is going to be wide open this year. And even the top 25, we do the weekly top 25, a group of guys, as I'm sure you're familiar with, Eric Haslam, Kevin Sweeney, Lucas Harkins, guys like that. We put together our top 25s every week for the Rockin' 25. And this past weekend, when I was doing my top 25, honestly, there's maybe like 14 or 15 teams that I look at and say, okay, these teams belong in the top 25. They're playing really well. They deserve a slot. And then after that, there's a lot of fillers. I mean, I had a lot of trouble picking, that the final 10, 12 teams in my rankings. It's hard to do right now. So many teams are not playing up to par. So it's pretty disappointing. But, again, there's a lot of time left. For only a little over a month into the season. So a lot of time left. With conference play coming up, things could change, but it's been definitely disappointing. So let's get into some of these games real quick. I'm sure you saw for my followers on Twitter, I was able to go down to the tip-off, the Holiday Classic at Mohegan Sun yesterday. I was lucky enough to meet up with Kevin Sweeney from CBB Central. I also met up with Brad Calavaro. Brad's doing a lot of stuff right now. He's working for Rush the Court, covering the Big East. He's doing some stuff for Busting Brackets. Also, he's doing some work for SoutheastHoops.com with Blake Level. So it was great to finally, meet those guys in person. Social media is a funny world where you have all these really close friends, but you never see these people. So it was definitely cool to meet up with those guys and watch the games with them and just chop it up for a little while. So, the first game of the day was Rhode Island and West Virginia. Rhode Island wins that game 83-70. I think West Virginia has to be up at the top of most disappointing teams this season. And I definitely, from the looks of it, overrated this team. I think Javon Carter might be the biggest loss for a team in all of college basketball this past season. They also lost Daxter Miles, who was a very good player. But Carter was such a big part of West Virginia for so long. They look like a mediocre ball club. I mean, I was very disappointed with their play. They just don't have a lot of ball handlers. Their backcourt is very, very thin outside of James Beetle Bolden. He struggled yesterday. He only had 1 point. And if West Virginia is going to win basketball games, Beetle Bolden has to be scoring double figures. He has to be their best offensive player. So it was, first of all, this game was awful for fouls. I think there was like 54 foul calls in this game. It was like every 5 seconds, the refs were blowing a whistle. It was a competitive game. It went back and forth most of the contest. Rhode Island kind of pulled away at the end. But it was definitely a competitive game, but still, I got to just harp on West Virginia. And granted, Sagaba Kanate did not play yesterday. He's dealing with a knee injury, but if you're West Virginia, you're a Big 12 team. You're playing a middle of the pack, I think, at best, A10 team in Rhode Island. You should win that game. So West Virginia falls to 6-4. They did have a couple good performances. Wesley Harris, I thought, maybe played his best game in a West Virginia uniform. He had 18 points and 9 rebounds. Ace Ahmad had 12 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists. Lamont West had 9 points and 8 rebounds off the bench. Outside of that, though, they just didn't get any production from anybody else. So I think this West Virginia team's has a lot of work to do. They're going to have to figure out something in that backcourt because they don't have good point guard play. Again, ball handlers are a big issue. And I just think it's a consistency thing. Guys like Wesley Harris and Lamont West are really, really talented, but they just don't give it, they don't give what the team needs on a consistent basis. Lamont West, who I'm a big fan of, and I think he's very capable, he'll score 24 points one night and he'll score 4 points the next night. So they need more consistency from those guys. They just need better guard play. So West Virginia's got, again, a lot of work to do. On the other side, I thought it was a really good performance by Rhode Island. Cyril Langevin has really, really surprised me. He's played a lot better than I anticipated. He had 15 and 6 yesterday. Jeff Doughton was his usual self, 18 points, 7 assists, 5 rebounds. He's really a fantastic point guard and somebody who doesn't get enough attention and credit. He's really, really good. Fats Russell had 18 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists, which, was really, really good. But, he was 6 for 16 from the floor, which has made, his big issue is efficiency. But, they got contributions from their bench. Tyrese Martin had 7 points and 4 rebounds. Christian Thompson had 12 points and 8 rebounds. He did start the game, and Jermaine Harris had 11. So that's what Rhode Island needs, and that's been the issue. They can't just rely on Langevin and Doughton and a couple spurts here from Fats Russell. They need more production from their bench and the reserves. And when they do that, they can be a capable team. And, the A10 is wide open, as we know, so maybe they can make some noise if some of those role players, can start to play better. So, again, disappointing, showing from West Virginia. Rhode Island did play a good basketball game, so give them credit. But, I'm definitely going to be keeping my eye on West Virginia pretty intently here going into conference play because they don't look like an NCAA tournament team right now, which is very surprising and very disappointing. The second game of the day was Tulsa and Dayton, and Dayton kind of struggled yesterday, and Tulsa comes out and gets a really nice win, 72-67. Tulsa is now 9-3. Dayton falls to 5-5. Dayton is a team that I still think is going to be in that top 4 in the A10. I think their record doesn't really reflect how good a team they are. They've had a brutal schedule. Unfortunately, they didn't win any of those games, which is disappointing. But, they played Butler, which they beat, which was their best win of the year. They had to play Virginia, Oklahoma, Mississippi State, Auburn. So just an absolutely brutal schedule. I think once Dayton gets into Atlantic 10 play, they're going to start, improving on that record. This is a team I really like. They're a little disappointing offensively. I think they should be a better offensive team with all the weapons they have. Josh Cunningham, Jalen Crutcher, Obi Toppin's a kid that I really like. He's an up-and-comer. He's a freshman. Trey Landers, Ryan Mike Cassell there, Jordan Davis. I mean, they have a lot of talented guys that can score the basketball, and they're just not great offensively. They average 72 points a game, which isn't terrible, but, they can't shoot the 3 ball. They're not a good free throw shooting team, so hopefully they can get better on that end of the floor. They're tough though. They're gritty. They play good defense. That's going to keep them in a lot of ball games. But again, just a little bit better on the offensive end, and I think Dayton's going to clearly be one of the better teams in the A10. So again, that 5-5 record really doesn't reflect how good a team they are. On the other hand, though, I was impressed with Tulsa. Now, I don't know how good this Tulsa team really is. They haven't played a great schedule. If we're looking here, they have a win over a Dayton yesterday. They also beat Oklahoma State last Wednesday, which is a solid win, I think. Other than that, they've played a pretty, cream puff schedule, if you want to call it that. They did play Nevada fairly tough. They only lost that game by 10. and they lost to Southern Illinois, which is a pretty good ball club. So, but Tulsa 9-3. Really impressed with Daquan Jeffries yesterday. I think let's check his numbers real quick. He was impressive. I think Sterling Taplin's a really good player. And Igbognu there, Martin's Igbognu is a talented kid as well. Let's see here. Jeffries had 16 points and 6 boards. Martin's Igbognu had 17 points on the day. Sterling Taplin had 9 points, but he did have 4 assists. I thought he played pretty good point guard. So maybe Tulsa can kind of creep up into that middle of the pack in the AAC, because we know that's another league like the A10 that's just really down and doesn't look very strong. So maybe Frank Haith can get that team going and maybe finish in that top 5. Maybe that's a little bit of a stretch, but we'll see. Long way to go here. But again, nice win for Tulsa. Keep your eye on Dayton. I think they'll be fine. They'll improve on that record. The last game of the day was Quinnipiac and Drexel. Only watched a few minutes of that ball game. It was really kind of underwhelming. So kind of took off after that. But it was definitely a fun day in hoops. It was a pretty decent crowd. It was basically like a home game for Rhode Island, because Rhode Island's campus is right down the way from Mohegan Sun in Connecticut. Probably about an hour's drive, not even maybe, from their campus. So once that game got over, the Dayton-Tulsa game, the place was pretty empty, maybe just a few thousand people. But you got Dayton and Tulsa not really in the area, so I understand that. But still, fun day in hoops. So we got a lot more to talk about, though, guys. We got a lot of games to cover. I wanted to start here with the North Carolina Gonzaga game. And, Gonzaga, had a long trip. They have a few injuries they're dealing with right now. Obviously Gino Crandall's been out. Colin Tilley has been out. So, it wasn't a bad loss at all. It's a tough place to play. North Carolina really needed, I thought, that game. They've been people are kind of down in North Carolina, and I thought they played great. And, North Carolina is a team that I thought was a top 5 level team coming into the season. They've kind of played up and down a little bit. There's been some really good things I've seen from them, and they've struggled in certain areas as well. But they win 103-90, really high-scoring game, and just unbelievable performances from Luke May and Cam Johnson. Luke May had 20 points and 16 rebounds. Cam Johnson, 25 points, 8 of 12 from the field, 6 of 8 from 3. This kid is playing fantastic basketball. He's going to be an ACC Player of the Year level player. I didn't think he was this good. I really didn't. Michael Hunter from ACCBasketballReport.com. You can find him on Twitter. I'm sure you're familiar with him. He's been on the podcast a couple times. He told me in the preseason during the ACC preview, he said Cam Johnson is going to have a huge year. And so far, he's playing really well. He's averaging 16.6 points per game, 5 rebounds, and he's shooting 49% from 3. Now he's 26 of 53 from 3. He's playing great basketball. Kobe White had a good game in this one too, 15 points and 6 rebounds. Garrison Brooks, 9 and 9, and he's playing well. I said before the season, if one of these young bigs like Brooks or Sterling Manley or Brandon Huffman, if one of those guys can kind of step up and raise their game this year, North Carolina's going to be fine. They don't need a ton of production from those guys. They just need those guys to rebound, give them, 6-8 points a night, and North Carolina will be fine. And it was a game, like I said, I think North Carolina really needed a really good performance against a really good club, and they did it. Again, no harm with Gonzaga losing this game. They had a couple nice performances. Perkins had 20 points and 8 assists. Zach Norvell had 21. Brandon Clark had 15. Rue, again, with another great game, 17 and 7. But North Carolina just a little too much for the Zags. If we're looking at the stats here, North Carolina was just on fire from three-point land. They were 13 to 25, just super efficient. Gonzaga really just couldn't slow this team down. They absolutely crushed Gonzaga on the boards, 39 to 20. So just too much for the Zags. on Saturday night. But again, no harm losing that game. Up next, let's talk about Kansas and Villanova real quick. Kansas is a team that, I have no problems with them being number one in the country. I don't. They're 9-0. They have a lot of really signature wins already. But have they played really good basketball? I don't know yet. They've had spurts. But this is the scary thing about them. Just imagine when Kansas really gets going, how good this team's going to be. And they get a win over a scrappy Villanova team who, Villanova has just had a roller coaster season. They started off struggling. Then they win the Advocate Invitational. Then now they're back kind of struggling again. They lose to Penn, which, granted, Penn's a good basketball team, but Villanova should win that game, 10 out of 10 times. They really should. So looking at this ball game, Dedrick Lawson, 28 points and 12 rebounds for Kansas. Just Villanova had no answer for Lawson. He's a horrible matchup for a small Villanova team. He played really well. LeGerald Vick, how about his performance? 29 points and 7 rebounds. So Kansas, they played a tough team at home, and they won. And they're winning ball games, but have they played great? I don't think so. But just look at the schedule. I mean, they've beaten Tennessee, they beat Marquette, they beat Michigan State. I mean, they beat Villanova, they beat New Mexico State. They're not blowing anybody out, though. That's the thing. But again, on the other hand, you can make an argument. They've played a really tough schedule, so should they be blowing these teams out? So who knows? I mean, I just don't think they've played as good as they're capable. And again, that's the scary thing. So Villanova now going on to their side here, they're 8-4. I thought it was a valiant performance by them. Going into playing at Kansas's arena there, it's a tough place to play. Kansas almost never loses at home. So Allen Fieldhouse, just one of the best home court advantages in the country, as we know. But just a tough game. And I think the major issue here with Villanova is point guard play. Again, they're not a huge team, so they kind of get crushed a little bit inside against some of these bigger clubs. Another thing is here, Eric Paschal, who, don't get me wrong, Eric Paschal is a very, very good basketball player. He's an all Big East guy. But I think a lot of people put him in that kind of upper echelon of players this year, like an All-American first teamer. I don't think he's that level of player. Is he an all Big East guy? Is he a third teamer? Maybe. But he's just not that, he's just not that level of player, in my opinion. And this whole point guard situation has been difficult. We all thought Javon Quinterly was going to be the guy. He's a 5-star kid, comes in. We all think, oh, he's going to take over the point guard role for Jalen Brunson. Everything's going to be fine. Villanova is going to be a top 10 team. Just hasn't worked out that way. And Colin Gillespie, granted, he's played pretty solid. I mean, he's averaging 12 points a game. He's only averaging about 3 assists a game. We'd like to see that get up a little bit. He does turn over the ball quite a bit, but he's shooting the three pretty well. Is he a Big East starting point guard? Not sure. He has played well of late, though, so we have to give him credit for that. But, I don't know if he's going to be able to do it, the whole season and play at a high level. So that's been an issue. Also, Joe Cremo, Albany transfer. I think a lot of people thought he would come in and be an impact scorer for this team. He hasn't done it. He's averaging 6 points a game. He's not distributing at all, 1.4 assists. He doesn't rebound, 1.8 rebounds a game. He is shooting the three well, but he's just not getting many opportunities, it seems. So hopefully he can get back going. A couple positives for Villanova. I think Demir Cosby-Roundtree's played really well. He's averaging 6.3 points per game. He's a great rebounder, 7.8 rebounds per game. He blocks shots. Sadiq Bey, freshman, has played solid as well. But, they have a lot to work on. They're solid defensively. They're not playing great defense. But we'll see what happens. Jay Wright's a fantastic coach, as we know. So there's plenty of time left. I wouldn't be shocked if they win the Big East here and continue their reign over the conference. But just a lot of issues and a lot of things to kind of fix, and hopefully they can do it. But we'll see what happens. Villanova again has plenty of talent. They just kind of have to figure out some things and get back on track. So the next game I wanted to talk about real quick is Tennessee and Memphis. And let me just say first right away here, guys, I think Tennessee and Memphis need to play every year. This is a rivalry game. I just think back to that game back in, I think it was 08 or 09, when Bruce Pearl was at Tennessee and Calipari was at Memphis. And I think Memphis was number one. Tennessee was number two. Just a fantastic matchup. One of the most watched games in ESPN history, I believe. And I believe Tennessee won that ball game. And I just remember what a great rivalry this was. And now that, Penny Hardaway's at Memphis, he's going to be building that program back up, hopefully. Tennessee's a top 5 team. Rick Barnes done a fantastic job. This is a game that needs to be played every year. So I just wanted to get that out of the way real quick. Memphis is not at the level yet where they're going to be competing with Tennessee. They played fairly well. Tennessee won the ball game 102 to 92. Tennessee improves to 8-1 on the season. This is just a fantastic basketball team. And, you can talk about Grant Williams. You can talk about Schofield and all these guys in the backcourt with Bones and Bowden and guys like that. But this team, you guys know I'm a big experience guy. And there's just juniors and seniors all over the floor for this team. I think they got a taste of winning last year. This is a team that was picked to finish 13th or something in the SEC. They end up winning a piece of the SEC championship. They did win an NCAA tournament game. They lost at the buzzer to Loyola, I believe, which was disappointing. But again, they got a taste of it. They got some experience under their belts, and I think this is the year they're really going to take off. They have Grant Williams, who's one of the best players in the country, former SEC Player of the Year last year. Rick Barnes has just done an incredible job with this team. They're playing, they're really, really good offensively. When you watch them, they don't really look explosive offensively, but at the end of the game, they score 80 points, 85 points. They can really shoot the 3 ball. I think they're at 36% on the year. They're efficient, from inside the 3 line. So Tennessee does a lot of good things. They're not the deepest team in the world, but still, Tennessee's really, really good this year. So I'm excited. I hope they really make a run. I like Rick Barnes a lot. I like this group. They're a very likable team. So we'll see what happens with the Vols here heading into conference play. On the other side, Memphis is 5-5. No harm in losing this ball game. They were expected to. But, you can make an argument, in my opinion, that Memphis has the most talented roster in the AAC. You might disagree with me. I'm not saying they do, but I think you can make an argument that they do. And I think at 5-5, it's been somewhat disappointing. And they've played a pretty good schedule, though. They lost LSU. They beat Yale in a double overtime game. Yale's a solid team. Oklahoma State was a definitely winnable game. They lost that one, unfortunately. They lost to Charleston, which is another game where you're playing a really, really good mid-major. That would have been a nice win for this, kind of young team. They didn't get it done. And then Texas Tech, they had Texas Tech on the ropes at home, and they blew that game. And then they beat South Dakota State, which was a nice win. They beat UAB, which was a nice win. So there's kind of been a mixed bag with the Tigers. I would have liked to see them at least at, say, they're 10-10. At least like to see them maybe at 7-3 right now, but just didn't get it done. We still don't know if Penny Hardaway can coach. We know Penny Hardaway is going to be, he's going to recruit like crazy, get a lot of talent. He's, James Wiseman's coming in next year, but we just don't know yet. But he's going to get players. Can he put them on the court and figure out how to win ball games? We'll find out. But it's just a little early to tell. But still, it's nice that there's a buzz around Memphis. The fans are excited. That's a program that, is when Memphis is good, it's good for college basketball. So hopefully the Tigers can make some noise in the American Athletic Conference. I think they can. If they get some experience under their belt here with the non-conference, games, and they go into conference play, maybe they can make some noise, because we know the American Athletic Conference is absolutely wide open. So I'm excited. I'm not going to give up here on the Tigers yet. It's still very early, but definitely somewhat disappointing at 5-5. I think they should at least have a few more wins under their belt. So, all right, so let's move on here. Got to talk about Indiana and Butler. Just a fantastic basketball game. They played at Indianapolis. They have that kind of Indiana games. Notre Dame played Purdue. Butler plays, Indiana here. And Indiana wins this game 71-68 on a buzzer beater from Rob Finney, which was like at least a 35-footer, something like that. Just incredible from top of the key. Looking at this matchup, Juwan Morgan had 35 points. Juwan Morgan's one of my favorite players in college basketball. Romeo Langford played well. He had 13 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. Rob Finney had 9 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. He hit the game winner. And I thought preseason he was going to be the starter at some point, and he's stepped in right away and done a good job. I think Devontae Green was looked at as possibly the guy, but I thought Finney was going to come in and step in, and he's already done that. He's doing a great job. He's averaging 7 points a game, 3.6 assists a game. He's doing a pretty good job taking care of the basketball. He's still young, but this Indiana team I think is going to be really, really good. They're off to a 9-2 start. Romeo Langford has played well. He's averaging 17 and 5. He's really starting to get going. He's not shooting the 3-ball well. He's only at 22%, so we'd like to see that, kind of get going here. But, they got a really good core. If Finney can play good point guard, they have Morgan and Langford. Those two guys right there are going to win you a lot of basketball games. That's just a fantastic duo. Morgan's averaging 17 and 7. Butler, though, is a team that I think is probably going to be an NCAA tournament mix. They have that fantastic backcourt. I can't say enough about Paul Jorgensen. Jorgensen's just playing fantastic. He did not play well in this game. He only had 5 points. He was 2-10 from the field. But this is a kid that's averaging 16 points a game, averaging 4 rebounds. He's shooting the ball at a 40% clip from 3. You pair him with Kamar Baldwin in that backcourt. That's one of the better backcourts in the country right now. Baldwin is just an all-around good player. The only really big flaw with him is he can't shoot the 3. He's shooting 26% from 3. He does everything else well. He scores the basketball at a really high clip, 16 points a game, 4 assists, 6 rebounds. He's a really versatile guy, really does everything well. You just got to get better from the perimeter. But, Jorgensen is the guy that can really knock down shots. Shaun Mcdermott played really well in this game. He had 20 points and 6 rebounds. He's been playing well for this club. He's another 3-point shooter that can really knock down shots. This Butler team can really shoot the 3, 37% as a team. So they're at 7-3 right now. I think Butler is going to finish probably in that top 5 in the Big East, and they're going to get another NCAA tournament bid, in my opinion. I think Indiana is going to be in the NCAA tournament. They're probably a top 4 team in the Big Ten, in my opinion. But 2 very good ball clubs. Really a heartbreaking loss for Butler, but what are you going to do? It happens. On the other end of this little Indiana little tournament here, Purdue unfortunately loses another game to Notre Dame. Notre Dame wins 88-80. Just another tough game for Purdue. Purdue, again, though, kind of, they've played a brutal schedule, but they haven't won any of these games. That's the problem. If you go through a stretch of, Florida State, Michigan, Maryland, Texas, Notre Dame, that's a brutal schedule. If you win 1 or 2 of those, you're in great shape. They lost every single. They did meet Maryland. We'll give them that, but they lost to Florida State. They lost to Michigan. They lost at Texas, and they lose to Notre Dame in Indianapolis. They're at 6-5, and I'm sorry to say, I kind of pegged this team to be an NIT team this year. There's still plenty of time left, but it just seems like, and this was my worry, Carson Edwards, just there's not much behind him consistently. You can't have Carson Edwards go out every night and score 30 points. You just can't do it. And, and they're getting spurts from guys. Like one night it's Ryan Klein, one night it's, Matt Harms. they just don't have enough consistent scoring behind Carson Edwards, in my opinion, to be an upper echelon Big Ten team. Ryan Klein, I'll say, has played a lot better than I thought he would. You have Evan Boudreau as well, excuse me. But the two guys that have been disappointing is Harms and Eastern. In my eyes, they're not disappointing. In a lot of Purdue fans' eyes, they're disappointing. In a lot of just Big Ten fans in general, I think both of these guys are really good players. I think future they're going to be really good Big Ten players. I just don't think they're ready yet to take that next step and be impact guys. Nogel Eastern, really good player, versatile, good defender. He just can't score. He's just not ready to score. He shoots 25% from the free throw line. He's got one of the worst shots I've ever seen, to be honest, unfortunately. But, Harms is really good defensively. He's not ready to score on a consistent basis night in and night out. So I think the Purdue offense right now is basically Carson Edwards goes out, scores 25, 30 points, and they just hope that somebody else steps up that night and scores double digits. But it just hasn't happened. Again, they're 6-5 right now. So we'll see what happens with Purdue. I think I picked them 7th in the conference preseason. I think that's a pretty good spot right now for them. Looking at Notre Dame, they had some very disappointing news. Rex Pfluger tore his ACL in this game, and he played a really good basketball game that day too, which is pretty disappointing. He had 7 points, 3 rebounds, and 10 assists. He played a great ball game, but unfortunately, that kind of, I think, knocks out Notre Dame's slim chances for an NCAA tournament bid. I thought even with him, they weren't going to get to the NCAA tournament. But, now TJ Gibbs is going to have to do even more. DJ Harvey is going to have to do it even more. But this is a nice win for Notre Dame. John Mooney had 21-7. Gibbs had 12, and Harvey had 19-5. I think Harvey's the guy that really needs to step up here. He's come back from surgery and played fairly well. He's averaging 11-5. TJ Gibbs, though, he's averaging 13-3, 3.5 assists a game, but he's shooting 33% from the floor and 30% from three. He's got to be better. A lot of people pegged him as a kind of all ACC guy, and he's just not playing up to par right now. But we'll see how they go on with Pfluger. Without Pfluger, Pfluger's not a huge scorer, but he's kind of a glue guy and does kind of everything. He distributes, he rebounds, pretty good defender in my opinion. But that's still a pretty big loss because when you lose your senior glue guy like that's tough. So we'll see how Notre Dame does. Mike Bray, obviously we know, is a fantastic coach. And, we'll see. But again, I just didn't think Notre Dame was going to be that good a team this year after losing Matt Farrell and Bonzie Colson last year. Another game I just wanted to hit on real quick was Mississippi State and Cincinnati. Mississippi State won that game 70-59. It's a game that I think they should have won. I still don't think this Cincinnati team is very good. I think Jerron Cumberland is a really good player, but if he's your best player, I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. I think he's more of a 2 or a 3 type guy. If you look at the stats here, Cumberland's averaging 15 a game. Then you have Keith Williams at 11, Trey Scott at 10, but just kind of slim pickings after that. I think Kane Broome, I think people expected way too much from him. He's averaging 9 points a game, and I think that's kind of what he is. He's going to give you 8 or 9. He's not shooting the 3 well this year at all. Another kid who I think I expected a lot more from is Rayshawn Fredericks, and he's really been pretty much non-existent for this club. But again, I just don't think they have enough firepower. It's kind of like in the same situation as Purdue where, Cumberland goes out and scores 15, 20 a game, and there's just not much behind him. So again, looking at this game on the Mississippi State side, the Weatherspoon brothers are really, really good. I think they combined for 22. They had like 9 rebounds. Lamar Peters played great. He had 14 points and 9 assists. This Mississippi State team's really good. I mean, they're 9-1 right now. They're a top 25 club in my opinion. Very athletic team. Great backcourt. I think they're fantastic. I think they're going to be an upper echelon SEC team. I think Eric Holman is one of the more underrated bigs in the league. He's he's not going to give you 20 points a game or anything like that, but he's going to give you 10. He's going to give you 8 to 10 boards a game. He's going to block, 2-3 shots a game. Really talented and athletic, big. So Mississippi State wins that game 70-59. I just wanted to talk about that real quick. I'm interested to see where Cincinnati finishes in the AAC because, again, I just don't think, there may be an NCAA tournament team. I'd say they're a bubble team at best. I just don't love this club this year. And again, no harm. They lost a lot of talent from last year's team. Jacob Evans, Washington's gone. So there's just a lot to replace there. So let's talk some Pac-12. And boy, the Pac-12 has just been so disappointing. And the sad thing is, we didn't really expect that much from the Pac-12. We probably, I think a lot of us thought, oh, they're going to probably hover around where they were last year. No, not at all. This league is absolutely horrible right now. Looking at the Saturday games, and we're going to talk about a few of these games. Let me just run through some of the scores. Oregon State loses to a really poor Texas A&M team. UCLA loses at home to Belmont, which is just really disappointing. Kentucky crushed Utah. Then Georgia almost beat Arizona State. And Arizona State lost to Vanderbilt tonight, which I think is a really bad loss. But Arizona State was able to pull that game out. Washington had a big opportunity against Virginia Tech, couldn't pull it out. They lost that one. Stanford beat Eastern Washington. Oklahoma, had an easy time with USC. And then Baylor goes into McKeon and crushes Arizona. The final score was only like 11, but they dominated that basketball game. And I want to talk about that one real quick. I thought Arizona was going to be a lot better this year than I think some people thought. They've had a couple solid wins. They're 7-4 right now, but Baylor is a team who I think's pretty good. I mean, I don't think they're as good as, they're as poor as some people think. But Baylor wins that game 58-49. They just absolutely, look at the numbers here, crushed. Here's the rebounding numbers. Baylor had 46 rebounds. Arizona had 14. I mean, it was just absolutely ridiculous. Nobody really showed up for Arizona. Jeter had 6. Acott had 5. Coleman had 7. The only guy that really showed up was Brandon Randolph. He had 15 points. But give credit to Baylor. They pick up a huge road win. Makai Mason, 22 points and 7 rebounds. He's actually played really well. He's played in 6 ball games. He's averaging 14.7 a game. He's starting to get healthy. And if he gets healthy, this is a team that you got to watch out for. Tristan Clark is a really up-and-coming sophomore big. They have Mario Kegler, who's really talented. Mark Vital is a kid I love. Mark Vital is not flashy. He's not going to score a ton, but he's an excellent rebounder. He had 16 rebounds on Saturday. He plays great defense. He's versatile. So really, really good win for Baylor. The other game I wanted to talk about is Washington and Virginia Tech. Washington's been really disappointing. I had Washington in my top 25 preseason. They're now 7-4. If you look at the schedule, let's look at the schedule here real quick. They had an opportunity against Auburn on the road. They couldn't get that done. They lost to a Minnesota team they probably should have beat. They lost to Gonzaga. They played well in that game. I'll give them credit for that. But then they have this Virginia Tech opportunity. They lose 73-61. So just so disappointing for the Pac-12. Another opportunity blown. And then we also obviously have to talk about Belmont and UCLA. Now, don't get me wrong. Belmont is a fantastic basketball team. Rick Byrd does a great job. But UCLA's got to win that game. I mean, they're at home. They're the more talented ball club. They lose that game 74-62. And then Steve Alford, is he going to get fired this year? That's a huge question. And if we're looking at a UCLA schedule, they haven't done much in the non-conference. They played Michigan State. They blew that one. North Carolina, they lost to North Carolina. They beat Notre Dame. That's their best win. That's really their best win this year. That's really disappointing. They just don't have a lot of good, the opportunities they had. They didn't come through. It would have been nice to, grab a win over Michigan State or North Carolina, but unfortunately they didn't get it done. And then the final game I wanted to talk about, USC just continues to disappoint. Andy Enfield, how many 4-star guys do you need, Andy? to win basketball games. They've been so disappointing the last 2 years, and they've had some injuries and some things like that. But he has the number one recruiting class coming in next year. Are they going to win basketball games? We just don't know. I mean, they're sitting right now. Let's see, they're 5-5. This is a team that's just loaded with talent. I mean, there's just too many good players on this team for them to be 5-5. Let's look down the roster. Nick Rakocevic, I think he's been one of the most improved players in the country. He's averaging 15 and 11. We know Benny Boatwright's great. Kevin Porter, Jonah Matthews, Shaquan Aaron, Derek Thornton, Jordan Usher, Elijah Weaver. How many guys do you need to win basketball games? It's just so disappointing. So just the Pac-12, along with the A-10 has been so disappointing. Just a few more games. We'll move on from the Pac-12. I don't want to talk much more about the Pac-12, but just a couple more games. I just wanted to move on to the AAC real quick. I know we talked about Cincy and Memphis a little bit, but SMU, in my opinion, SMU is a team that you have to watch out for in this conference. They have maybe the best starting five in the conference, in my opinion. They beat Georgetown this past weekend, 81-73 on the road. A nice win. Ethan Chargos had 17 points. Isaiah Mike had 17 points and 9 boards. Jamal McMurray had 19. And if you put that top five, that starting five with Chargos, Mike, Foster, McMurray, and Witt, that's probably the best starting five in the AAC, in my opinion. So I think SMU can make a little bit of noise. If they can get some production from their bench, I think they can make some noise. I really, really do. And in the other game I wanted to talk about real quick, hold on one second here. Just going to move on, was Houston and St. Louis, which was yesterday. Houston, it was a crazy ending here, but Houston pulls it out at the end. Houston is now, what's their record? 10-0. And Houston has some really nice wins. Houston beats, St. Louis yesterday, who's probably the best team in the Atlantic 10. They beat LSU. They beat Oklahoma State. They beat Oregon, and they beat BYU. So that's a really, really good non-conference resume. I think they're absolutely going to be the NCAA tournament team. I think they're the best team in the AAC, along with the likes of maybe Cincinnati. I think SMU's in that conversation. Maybe Temple. I think Temple's played pretty well. And they have a big matchup with Utah State on Thursday, who's been a surprise team. So I'm actually pretty surprised how good Houston is. I was definitely wrong about this team. I thought they would be an NCAA tournament team possibly this year, but I thought they'd take a step back after losing Rob Gray. Excuse me. But Armani Brooks and Corey Davis, one of the better tandems in college basketball. Both those guys averaging 15 points a game. I can't say enough about Corey Davis. He's a fantastic basketball player. He was a JUCO transfer they picked up last year, just doing it all for Houston right now. And Galen Robinson Jr., he's never going to get a lot of pub because he doesn't score a ton. He is averaging 10 points a game this year. This is a kid that dishes out 6 assists a game, snags 4 rebounds a game as a guard. He does a really good job taking care of the basketball. He's got a 3.28 assist to turnover ratio. He's got 59 assists and only 18 turnovers on the year. He's shooting the 3 ball really well. So when you have a point guard like that and you have guys on the wings like Davis and Brooks, Davis is a backcourt guy, but you're going to be in really good shape. And they have formidable guys in that front court. Breon Brady isn't going to wow you, but he's going to go out. He's going to grab 6 boards. He's going to score 7, 8 points a night. I think Fabian White is one of the more up-and-coming guys in the conference. He just came back from an injury, so that even makes Houston even better. So I really like this roster the more I look at it. Then you got the transfer from UMass, DeJon Giroux. He's kind of slowly coming in. I think he's only played in like 3 games, so he's kind of coming back too. Fabian White as well. And then Grisham is another kid that they got to get a little bit more out of, but this is a really talented basketball team. I think Kellen Sampson's done a fantastic job. So I think Houston is clearly the best team in the AAC right now. I don't even think it's an argument. I'm going to look at this conference real quick and see what, so you have Houston and UCF are probably the 2 best teams. And then I think that next tier, in my opinion, would probably be Temple, Cincinnati, SMU, UConn, and Tulsa, maybe. I think those are the top teams. Memphis, I think, can get up there, but right now I think you have to put them closer to that, second or third tier because of their record and the way they played out of the gate here. But maybe the AAC can be a little bit better, once conference play starts. But, I don't know. I think it's going to be probably a 2-bid league at best. So pretty disappointing. Again, outside of, like I said earlier in the podcast, outside of the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Big 12, there's just so many disappointing conferences, so much mediocrity. It's really disappointing. Just wanted to mention before we finish up here, I think Dean Wade is going to be out for a significant amount of time with a foot injury, which is really disappointing because this is the same thing that happened last year, and he missed the NCAA tournament. So that's pretty disappointing. But there's just a lot of teams that just haven't hit their stride yet. So hopefully some of these teams that have started off slow kind of get it going here in late December heading into conference play. But I think we covered a lot tonight, everybody. So I really appreciate everybody listening. I will be back next week. So that's going to wrap it up for the podcast. Sorry. So I'll be back next week with a guest. I apologize last week, just a little too busy. Didn't get a podcast, a weekly recap in. And then this week I had trouble getting a guest on, but I will be back next week. I will get a guest on, so there'll be a little bit more back and forth. But I hope you enjoyed my solo podcast tonight. I had it was actually kind of nice, I got to say, having a little week off here. There wasn't a ton of games, kind of rest up here, get back into the action this week. So a lot to talk about. I think we got a pretty decent slate coming up soon. I really don't look ahead, just so everybody knows that. I'm more of I look what's going on that day, and I go from day to day. I'm not somebody who looks, ahead, a week ahead or whatever like that. But so I hope we covered enough for you guys tonight. Lot to talk about. Obviously, a lot of good games this past weekend, which was nice after the break. So we will talk to you on Sunday. This is Tony Patelis. This is the College Hoop News Podcast. We'll see you next week. Have a great night.